So within the upcoming lessons, we are going to be building out a web page from scratch. We're going to be doing it relatively quickly. It's a one-page website, and it's actually going to be the website that you're looking at right now. And we're also going to be incorporating CSS and some JavaScript at the end of the course in order to add some advanced functionality. We're going to be styling and building out various sections. And as you can see here, there's some placeholder images and placeholder content. And as we scroll down, we've got that effect where we've got the different sections are changing. So it's hovering underneath and we're able to change those section hyperlinks as we roll through the different sections. So the concept of this site is to present really nice images in the background with some text on top and have additional text and information for that one-page website, present it to the user. We're also going to be using various web resources to get you more familiar with what's out there and how to build out a website from scratch. The source code is also included, and I do encourage you to follow along with the lessons. Do try it out for yourself, and you'll find with styling, there's a lot of tweaks that you're going to be able to do. And the more that you practice tweaking your styling, the better, the more comfortable you are going to get with applying styling. So the styling that we're going to be applying to the web page, a lot of different directions you can go with styling. So really try to make it your own, add your own spin to it. We're going to be creating a very default type page structure as well as applying very default styling to it. And you can really customize this to make it your own. So again, the source code is included, and I do encourage you to take that source code, try it out for yourself, make some tweaks and adjustments, see what happens, build out your own version of this web project. So when you're ready, let's jump right in and start building out this web page from scratch. Within the course, we are going to be using some resources, and it's actually up to you. So if you already have an editor, then you can go ahead and use the editor that you're using. In the course, we are going to be using brackets. So that's it open over here. There's various different themes that you can apply to brackets. And one of the really nice things about brackets is it has this live preview, which lets you open up within an HTTP address instead of a file protocol, and which is also really helpful. So it gives you the ability to kind of navigate through simulating what you would see on the web. So that's one of the best features of brackets. And in order to get brackets, it's an Adobe product, it's open source, so it's free to download, available at brackets.io. And again, that's optional. We just need a place in order to write code. So brackets is the one that I'm using within the course. The other thing that we're using within the course is a Chrome browser. Chrome browsers come with DevTools, and what DevTools is it allows you to open up this inspector. So you can take a closer look at your source code. You can see styling information. You've got your box model there, all the different elements. You can simply click on them and see all of these things that get applied to it. And you can uncheck them, and you could actually try out how styling works directly within your browser. And really useful tool. And it also has the console, which we are going to be using for our JavaScript development, because this gives us the ability to send information into the console that we normally don't see within the user. So we can see actually what our variables are and what our code is doing. There's some options with it. So if you click on the three dots, you can dock it over to the right-hand side, dock it to the bottom. There's also some options for setting. You can change the theme to light, to dark, whatever your preference is. There's a bunch of things you can play around with here. So the other options the other resources that we're going to be using within the course is we've got some placeholder information. So we've got placeholder images that we need. So this is going to be for the background. Placeholder.com, it's a great resource for placeholder images, as well as placeimg. So this allows you to generate various actual images. So another really good resource to be able to add into your project. So if you don't have the resources at hand, you can still build out your project with anticipation of getting resources. There's also a number of different lorem ipsum generators. So I usually use blind text generator, but there are a ton of them out there. And this is also really useful if we don't have our text that we want to place in our website. We can simply put some lorem ipsum text as placeholder text. So it does kind of look like real text, but it's actually meaningless, and it's kind of simulating what we're expecting to add into our web page once we actually get the copy. So we can develop and design our website before we have our copy and our images with the placeholder content. So when you're ready, let's begin, jump right in and start coding and building out this website. In this lesson, we're going to set up our index page. So this is going to serve as our main entry point to our web page. So let's begin. First thing that we should add is the doc type. So this specifies for the browser what type of document that it can be expecting. So it's doc type HTML. And you can go ahead and create a brand new file and just name it index.html. I'm going to be writing this in brackets. And I'll also get rid of the sidebar there. So we don't have any other files within this directory yet. We're going to specify the language. So this web page is going to be English language. And brackets is already adding the closing HTML tag for us. Next, let's set up head. And then within head, we've got some information that we can contain within here. So one of them is the title. And we'll just call it single page website. And then next, let's set up body. And then within the body, this is where all of our content is going to go. And we're going to divide up the sections of our body. So we're going to have a head area. And within the head area, we're going to contain some navigation. So we'll have a div. And then within this div, we can add in head content as well as our navigation. So the nav will just be a nav. And we're going to use unordered lists to structure our navigation. And then we'll have a bunch of list items that are actually going to be our navigation links. So we've got our main header area. Next, let's add in a section. So these are going to be the multiple sections within our web page, and this is going to provide even more structure for our content. And then our content inside is going to be sitting within a div. So these are going to be the main sections, and we'll create a bunch of these as well. So first of all, we're going to create a basic default template, and then we're going to reuse that over and over again within our project, and we're going to add in 5 different sections. And last but not least, let's set up our footer. And within our footer, we're going to create a div, and this is where all of our main content once again is going to be contained. And we're going to have 3 separate columns within our footer, and then we can have multiple pieces of content down there. And then lastly, before we close off our body, we are going to be doing a little bit of JavaScript, and we're going to have a placeholder here for our script. And then up here at the top, we can have a placeholder for our style. And once we build out our style, then we're going to copy it and paste it into a CSS file and link out to it from the main page. And we're going to do the same thing for the JavaScript. So all of this is coming up in the next section. So go ahead and create your basic HTML page, add some structure to it with the header, the section, and the footer. And next, we're going to be jumping into building out our navigation bar. So that's coming up next. This lesson, we're going to set up even more of the structure for our HTML page. So let's open this up a little bit bigger. List items are going to be in what we need to contain within our list items. So within the list item, we're going to be linking out to various parts of our web page. So make sure that you use the hash in order to link out to it. And we can have multiple sections. So we can have section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're not going to worry about what they're called at the moment. Also, I want to set a class, and we're going to use active class. So this is commonly used to indicate which particular section the user is currently on. And then out here, we can just do section 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can add in content later on. So we just want to get the basic structure and how it should look, and just duplicate this out, removing out the class active because we only want to have one that's going to be class active. And we're going to use JavaScript in order to update our class, adding in that active class on the selected section. So we can make as many sections as we want, 5 sections, or we could even do 6 sections. So it actually doesn't matter because the way that we're structuring it, it's going to be a lot of copying and pasting. So let's do 6. That should be 6. That one should be 5. So there we go. So that's essentially what our navigation bar is going to look like. And of course, we're going to build this out using our CSS. So it's going to make it look a whole lot better. So right now, this is just a plain old list. No styling has been applied yet. So down here within the section area, we want to make sure that the ID of the section matches that value that we've sent in here. So that when the user clicks section 1, and this is all HTML, it's actually going to know which section to go down to, and they have to match. So, and this is where we use the hash, because the section is specified by the ID, and this is why we need the hash in front of that part of that section 1 text. Also, I wanted to add in a class so that this is going to be a lot easier to style our sections with the class of section. And also, let's build out adding in a class here as well. So this is where our main content will go. So we can call it something like wrap or something like that. And this is where all of the content within that section will go. So it actually doesn't matter what content we have. They can all have various varying pieces of content, and we can wrap it really nicely using the class of wrap. So let's set this one up. And all we're going to do now is we're simply going to duplicate our basic existing template, and we're going to make 6 copies of it, and calling it section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is going to be our basic web page structure. So from this point, we can start adding in our styling and actually make it starting to look more presentable within the HTML, within the web page. So usually the way that we start is we start with a basic structure, and right now we see that it doesn't really look like anything. There's no content obviously in here, and we are going to be adding content later on. And this is just a simple unordered list. And the rest of the way that it's going to get styled out, this is all going to be done through CSS, and that's coming up in the next lesson. So continue to build out your web page. Just envision it that you've got multiple sections. You want the user to be able to click through. So however many amount of sections you have, just make sure that you've got them listed here within the unordered list or within the navigation. So coming up, we're going to continue to work on this, and we're going to build this out even more. This lesson is always a fun one because we actually get to style our navigation bar. So we do have our nav, we have an unordered list and a list item. We can also give our nav an ID in order to distinguish it in case we use nav again within our website. So let's just go ahead and just call it nav. So now we've given it an ID of nav so we can better identify it within our HTML. And we're selecting all the unordered list items, the unordered list within our ID of nav element. So first of all, we want to get this not to look like an unordered list. So we've got an option with the list style, and we can get rid of that. So what that does is immediately you see that that's gone. It gets rid of the list, those bullet points. We also want to display it within a block format. So that's display block. We also want to center it, so that's margin 0 auto. So that will automatically center that content. And next we need to turn it into a block format. So that's display block. And sometimes you're going to also see inline block. But for now, the way that we're going to do it, we're going to just do it as a block item. Next, let's take care of the list items. So we've got all of these list items listed here, and we want them to stack horizontally, not vertically. And the easy way to do that is to use floats. So nav list, and let's float those over. So we'll float those over to the left. And you're going to see as soon as you float them over to the left, then they actually just stack one next to the other. Also, let's give them a little bit of padding. And you can add padding to the left and to the right, or you could just add it to one side. So in this case, let's add it just to the one side. So do padding 10 pixels. And in order to see them, you could add in a border. And of course, we could get rid of this if we don't like it later on. You could add in a red border if you want. Whatever you want, whatever makes sense for you within the styling, you can pick the color. And next, let's grab, so we've got a pattern here with the list items. They all have hyperlinks in them. So let's grab that next. And with the hyperlinks, we want to get them not to look like links. So that means that we want to remove out the underline. And that's text decoration. So text decoration. And we're just going to set it to none. So that removes out that underline under the text. Next, let's set a font size. And we'll use 1 so that's about 16 pixels. And we can also specify a color. So in case you don't like the default blue color, you can specify a color at this point as well. And you can also be more specific. So if we want to change the background to a dark background, so sometimes you want your navigation bar to stand out, so you do a dark background. So let's set this color to white, and I know our text just disappeared. So let's take the list item here. So we've set it to white. Let's take the list item and we'll add a background color over here so that we can actually see them again. Now let's just stick with default of black. And we're going to change that as we hover over as well. And we can actually get rid of the border if we want. We can also add in a margin at this point as well so that they're not right next to each other. So that's always a good effect, that you don't want them just right next to each other. So this is where you can add in that margin. So do a margin for them, and we'll just do a really small margin. So 2 pixels margin. So there's a little bit of spacing between them. And take a quick look how they stack. So they stack really nice and neatly. And next, we can add in some effects for them. And this is going on the anchor text again. So on the anchor, we can add in a hover effect. And we can get rid of the text decoration. We can also get rid of the font size because we're not changing any of that. So we'll change that white to be red. So the background is red. So now whenever you hover over them, it goes red. So you know that these are clickable links. And of course, you can customize this however you want, make it look a number of different ways, whatever makes sense for you. Go ahead and customize this now. And the next lesson, we're going to continue to build this out, and we're going to start looking at the sections, adding in some content into those sections, and how we can actually scroll down to the various sections. So that's coming up next. Let's add some placeholder content to our sections, and we're going to work a little bit more on the sections within this lesson. So we know that we added the class section. So this can be any properties that we want to go over all of the sections. So we've got a class called section, and for now, let's add a border, solid, and let's make it a really light border. So just do color D. So those are our sections, and obviously we don't have any content in them quite yet. We can also set a minimum height. So if we want them not to be less than 500 pixels, then we could set it like that. And this is zoomed in. So if we go back to 100% zoom, we can see that all of our content is nice and neatly at least 500 pixels. There's another thing that I did want to add in, and that's going to be the container. So I've added in a div given a class of container, and I've wrapped all of the content inside. So this is actually going to give me the ability to do something with this class. So this is essentially a wrapper class, and it basically allows us to set a minimum width for our project. So any web page going in, we want to have at max size, whatever width this is. So we can do a width, or we could do a max width. So a max width will resize a little bit better. We also might want to do a minimum width as well, so that we know that we're not going to shrink down below a certain width. So max width, let's do 1040 pixels. And we'll add a border around this as well. So 1 pixel solid black so that we can see it. And you can see there we go. So we've got our border. And one of the things whenever you set a fixed width, it's not going to be centered anymore. So always remember that you should center that content. It's not going to look good otherwise. And in order to center the content, we saw that before with the navigation bar. So we're using margin 0 and setting it at auto. And the way that this is just the shorthand method for margins. So the way that it works, if you only set one value in the margin, then it's going to be for all four sides. If you set two values, the first side is going to be top and bottom, and the second side is going to be left and right. So this is where we're setting top and bottom to 0 margin and left and right to auto margin. And what auto does is it splits the difference, essentially centering that content. So that's the best way to center content within CSS. So we did say that we wanted to add in some placeholder content, and I do have a couple websites open over here that we're going to utilize within the upcoming lessons in order to get placeholder and dummy content. So this is lorem ipsum text, and this is a generator for lorem ipsum text, and we could generate whatever amount of text we want. So basically this gives us the ability to kind of make placeholder content that actually looks like real content, but it's lorem ipsum text, so it's not real content. So it's just placeholder content, and you can go ahead and you can deposit that within your page in order to make it look like you've actually got some real content in there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop that into a few of the sections so that this way our sections, when we go back to our web page and refresh it, it actually starts to look more and more like a web page. And this is also going to help within our design because we can actually see how the content is going to behave, how the content is going to look within the various sections. So this is going to be really super helpful. And you also see that now, because we do have content, when we click the various sections in the navigation bar, you're going to see that it actually brings us down. So it automatically brings the page view to the section that we're clicking. So let's do a little bit of cleaning up here and refresh again. And notice that the lorem ipsum is starting over here. So what we need to do, because we used floating to the left, whenever you float to the left, you also need to clear out those floats. So usually the way that we do it is we have a clear and we just do clear both. So this will clear out any floats, and then you add the clear class after you've used the floats. So all of these have floats within them. So after that navigation bar section, let's add in the clear class. So we see once we do that, our text automatically goes back over to the default left alignment. So it's not floating into the left part after the navigation bar. So that's important to remember, important step. So let's go ahead, grab a little bit more dummy text. And maybe this one might have a little bit less text. And it's up to you. Try to place it kind of similar to the text that you might be using within your page so that it really mimics what you're actually after as much as possible. And almost done. So we're going to add a little bit more content, and let's just do one paragraph here. And there's some options within Blind Text Generator as well to generate various types of text. So now we've got a huge page, we've got a lot of text, and we can also add in some images. So placeholder.com is a great resource for adding in images. You can generate images of varying sizes and place them within your content. So again, really super useful. And this is also used to simulate what it's going to look like if you actually have an image in your content. So I've added an image in section 2. And when we refresh, we can see that there's our image, there's our text. So all our dummy text is there and ready to go. So we're ready to continue to build this out. And we're going to need to use placeholder again so that we can get some actual background images. And the background images are going to be really important because they're going to help create that parallax effect. So all of that is coming up in the next set of lessons. And as we continue to build this out, it's going to start to look more and more like an actual one-page website. So right now, things are still kind of a little bit scattered, but we're actually beginning to see the beginnings of how our web page is going to be structured and what it's going to look like. This section, we are going to be making some tweaks. So we saw last time that whenever we click one of these, we actually get brought down to the section, but then we got to go scroll all the way up. So that's a really bad user experience. So what ideally we want to do is have our navigation bar stay at the top. And with CSS, there's an easy way to do that. So we saw that we've got header, div, ID, nav. So this is where our navigation bar is sitting. And we want to grab this whole header element and keep it right at the top. And in order to do that, we've got a number of options that we can do. We can grab our whole element here, and that's probably the best one. So in this case, we'll just call it mast. So that's for our top master header. So it's always a good idea to be able to distinguish it between other content on your page in case you use nav again or in case you use header again. That way you don't have any conflicts. So this is going to be a width of 100%. So it's going to go all the way across. We'll set a background. And we can do a background color. So we've got our background color. And we also need to set a height. Because remember, these are floats. And when you've got floats, that's why we don't actually see the content. So we can set it to auto, but maybe let's set it to an actual fixed height. So this can be a height, whatever makes sense within your page content. Sometimes developers like those kind of big fat ones. Sometimes you might want to do a little bit smaller as well. So do 50 pixels. So it seems to work fairly well. And of course, you probably want to get a better color. So let's stick to a grayscale. So this can be a really light grayscale or it can be a dark grayscale. Again, try to do the grayscale similar to what colors you're trying to pick. Also, typically, we do a margin off the top so that we don't want it sitting right at the top. So let's do 20 pixels off the top. So it looks a little bit more presentable this way. And this way, when we scroll, we want to have it within that fixed position there. So that is position, and we just set it as fixed. And this way, you're going to see that no matter where we scroll on our page, it's always fixed to that same position. So it doesn't matter where we go on the page, it's always going to be sitting there within that same spot. And that's ideal because when we go down to section 6, we don't want the user to have to go and scroll all of the way back up. So that's why it's the ideal way to do it in order to fix it at a particular position. There's also the navigation bar. So notice that now it doesn't really look that great. It's right up at the top. And we've got 50 pixels to work with. So this is our opportunity to take that navigation bar and maybe even move it down. So do nav and give it a margin at the top. And we can move it down 10 pixels or whatever makes sense. So in this case, it looks fairly well centered. So always take a look at it and just see how things are looking as you're building it out. And we're also notice that we probably need to move that entire wrapper down or entire container down. So now that we've got this one in a fixed position, it doesn't really make sense that we've got the container around that. So there we go. So that's at 100%. So even if we go larger or smaller, we see that it's coming in there within that type of format. So within the nav bar as well, we should set a maximum width. So that actually is in line with what we're looking at. So that should be actually down here within the nav bar. And we should also, so let's just refresh. And you can see that now it's going to float a little bit better. And actually even better than maximum width. Let's set a default width here so we don't have to have a maximum, minimum, and we can also float it over. So let's float it over to the right hand side. So this way, let's refresh just to make sure everything's still working properly. So this way, even though I get bigger or smaller, we've already got our navigation bar sitting here at the top, and we can always make use of the navigation. Even if we click to section 5, it's always sitting there floating on top of our content, really nicely and neatly presented there. And that's a good thing about having multiple different sections that we have within our HTML. So when we structured it, we've got our header, we've got a div in here, and right now the div really isn't doing a whole lot, but when you are trying to style, it's always a good idea to have that there in case you want to make use of it, in case you want to move something or set a different background color, you can always apply it there. That doesn't have to always take the parent's property. And then having a child in there, that's the navigation bar. Again, we can set additional settings, which we've done, and we've actually set a minimum width for this one, a float to the right, so we've moved over to the right. We've also got a margin off the top for that one as well. So that allowed us to have a little bit more options where we were setting the positioning, and we were also able to center some of our content there. We can also, at this point, if we wanted to, even make some of these even bigger. So we've got margin, we've got padding. So if we wanted to, we could make additional padding for the list items. And we can do the padding on all the way around as well. So if you wanted more of kind of a fatter effect here with the different list items, and then sometimes you might have to also adjust the margin at the top as well, so to get it once again centered. So go ahead and try this out for yourself, and it does always take a little bit of adjusting. That's why I really like to use brackets, because I've got this kind of live preview here, so whenever I make changes, I can see what happens here on the right hand side within the display area. And as I continue to build out the CSS, I can see all of those changes taking effect immediately. So open up your editor, try this out for yourself, build out that navigation menu, add it in as a fixed value so it's always on top of your text, and you're going to be ready to move on to the next section. Now we're ready to start adding in some background images to the section. So we're going to use placeholder.com, and you can actually get different color backgrounds as well, and you can change the size of them. So that's a really cool part of it, because this is actually really super useful. And unfortunately, you can't copy and paste it, but we can see what the format is. So we can use that same height and width properties, and then we can add in colors. So FFF, so the first part is for the text color, and then afterwards is for the background color. So let's take that format and let's set that up as backgrounds for the various sections we have. And with the sections, we can take them one at a time and apply styling to them. So for the first section, we're going to want to have a background image. So let's set that up first. So background, and it's going to be background URL. So this is where we need to have placeholder content. And we want to make it really large. So we want it to basically cover whatever our background is. So we can do something like 1200 by 800. And that's the nice thing about placeholder, is that it's not going to get pixelized, because it's just the way that it works. So let's also set a font color, and we can set a background color. And we can also add in text. So let's do section, or this should say text. So that's how you get text on top of the image. You do text and then equal the text to whatever you want it to say. So let's go back into our page, refresh it, and so there we go. So we've got section 1 showing up there nice and neatly. So let's add a little bit of styling to it. So we've got the background, and we can set a background size. So the background size that we want to be background cover. So background size is going to be cover. And what that is going to do is that's going to resize it to automatically fit nice and neatly within whatever our page size is. So that presents that background image really nice and neatly. We can specify if we want some padding there. So if we wanted 100 pixels of padding or whatever we want around the sides, we can do that as well. So right now we'll just leave it as background cover. Next, let's do another one. So for the second one, we're not going to make use of a background image. And for this case, let's just do a background color. And we're not going to have an image, so we don't need the cover. So do background and color. So let's make it white. So force it to be white. So for sure it's always going to be white. And then for the next one, we need another image. So let me clean this up a bit to realign that text. I'll make it a little bit bigger so we can see it. So let's update. So this is going to be actually section 3. And we can add in similar types of colors if we want, or we can switch it up entirely. So it's up to you. So whatever makes sense. And I removed the slash. So section 3 is going to have a yellow. Oh, this should be section 3. So it should have a yellow color. That one has a red. And maybe let's update this to be a little bit darker. So do a blue, we'll do a pink. And then lastly, let's take care of the other sections as well. So we've got section 5, which is also going to have a background image. And we can also do light text as well. So of course you're already going to have images for the backgrounds. So it's going to be really, it's going to be something that you're not going to have to deal with all of this coloring and styling. So the next section, this is optional. You can set it to various colors if you want. And you can do purple or blue-violet. So you'll have this type of effect. We're going into section 1, section 2, section 3, section 5, so on. But usually the best way to go really is to keep it white because that's going to give us that parallax type effect. So let's make sure we've got section 4. And then we're also going to do section 6. And if you don't have anything to customize on them, you could really easily, we could just do background color for all of the sections. And more than likely, we're probably not going to have any customizations. So for these ones, we are going to have an image in the background customized. But for all of the other sections, we can simply just do background color white. So that will force it to be white, just to make sure that things are white. So we are ready to continue to move on. So there are a few things that we do need to take care of. We've got text within the sections, so that doesn't really look great. So we need to do some styling to that as well in order to make it look a little bit better. So we can do that now as well. And all of these were within that same format. So when we built out the sections, we had this class of wrap. So wrap was essentially giving us the ability to do something with that content that's sitting inside those sections. So let's go down to section. And within the wrap, so this is where we can apply some styling to that content. And it really depends on what you want it to look like. Usually the way that I like to do it is I like to have a little bit of background color to it. So let's do border and radius. So we've got a little bit of rounding there to the sides. It's 20 pixels. Also, let's add in some padding. So the text isn't sitting directly right at the sides. And let's add in some margins at the top as well. So margin. We'll add in a margin at the top, and then the left and right we're going to do auto, so it will automatically center it. So 40 pixels at the top. And we should add in auto as well, so it centers it. And I also want to add in that RGB. So we've got the background color. So let's do RGB. And that's if we don't have RGB, so we need to make it much lighter. So RGB gives us the ability to do RGBA. So this was just for browsers that don't have RGBA. Most of them will have that now. And then lastly, we can set an opacity. So we could do something like that, where we see that we can actually see the images that are behind the text as well. And maybe we'll do a little bit more padding, so it's nice, a lot more centered there as well. So great. So we've got our content showing up. We've got our background images. And next, we need to update and style our footer. So that's coming up next. Let's build out our footer. So we haven't done that yet. And if we go to the bottom of the page, we have nothing there yet. And typically within a footer, you might find your copyright information, might find a bunch of links to other web pages. There's a number of things that you might find in here. So in this case, let's build out two different containers here. So we've got our main one. And we're going to do a div. So this one will be class, and this is going to be the first one. So this will be column number 1. And then within here, we can have copyright, my website, blah, 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 and maybe some contact us for more info. So there we go. So we've got something there. And then we might also have another column. So maybe this one is a smaller one, so column 2. And this one might contain a bunch of list items. So they might just be links to various pages within your website and whatever really just makes sense within your site. I'm just going to copy this one over. You can also have your social media links there as well. So next we need to style them. So we've got these unordered links. We've got call 1 and call 2. So let's go over to and we also got our footer. So if we wanted to, we could give it an ID of footer so we can better identify it. And let's go up to our style sheet, and apply some styling to these. So that was footer. So you might have a background color to it. So background color, usually you're going to see it as maybe a grayish color, or maybe even a fairly dark color. And you can do the font color to be light. And then we had two classes, so column 1 and also column 2. And we can specify how much space we want these columns to take up. So this one can have a width of, so maybe this is the bigger one. So this one is taking up 66%, and this one takes up 33%. So we've got the sizes here, and let's do a display. And this time, instead of floating, we've got our other option for inline block. So that basically allows us to stack things horizontally. And you can see as I've added that, then we get all of our network stuff here, and we've got our copyright information. And as a whole, maybe we should have had some padding there. And you can also customize this now as well. So if you wanted to move it up or down, you can also add in margins as needed. So margin, or you could do margin bottom if you want. So move it up a little bit. It all depends on, again, what you're trying to style. Always make sure that you make it larger, just to make sure things still look consistent and look proper. So now we've got our footer in place. So the next item that we need to take care of is we need to continue to build out the way our sections are. So let's take care of that next. And before we finish up, let's also set a width to our wraps. And we'll do a percentage width, so do something like 70%. Because we don't have a lot of text, and we want to present it in a much neater fashion. So next lesson, we're going to finalize with some additional tweaks. We do need to move all of our content down because we don't want our content starting out and we've got our navigation bar up here at the top. So we do ideally want to move all of that down, and we can do that in the next lesson. So that's coming up. So we're going to do some tweaks and make it look a little bit more presentable. In this lesson, we're going to be doing some fine-tuning and tweaks. So one of the things that we can see is that this section 1, we've got the navigation bar, so whenever the user comes in, it's not really the greatest experience. So we've got a number of things that we can do at this point. We can move that entire section down if we want. So we can grab all of section, or we can just move section 1 wrap down. So it's up to you, whatever makes more sense. So probably taking section 1 and then selecting wrap and moving that down would be the best option. So do section 1 wrap. And we can move it down from this point down. We can see that that element just got selected there. So let's give it a margin and give it a margin top. So this should be something enough to move the default text down below the navigation menu. So we still have our image showing up there in the background, and this isn't actually going to affect any of the other elements. So there we go. So we've got our text showing up, and you probably wouldn't have this much text either. It's all just depending on how you want to present your content. So the other thing too is that we can update our default font if we want. So there are some options, especially with Google fonts. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with your fonts. So you can set all of your fonts if you want. And we usually do set something for the body itself. And by default, to clear out any existing margins, to clear out any existing padding. So we set those to 0. And then width, so we always make width 100%. And we can also add in a font. So let's go over to Google Fonts. And they have 858 different fonts that you can pick from. So there's a lot of options here on the website. And these, they're going to give you also directions on how to install it. So it's a matter of going, maybe we could look at whatever are the featured fonts. And go back to the directory. So they've got a wide variety. So you can literally spend quite a bit of time here. So let's say, for instance, I particularly like this one here. So I want to see what this one looks like. Okay, it's great. I like it. So in order to add it to the page, so we go select the font, and we can see that that font has been selected. So they give you some options here, how to add that font in. You can import it directly into your style sheet, and this is the option that we're gonna go with. So let's go back into our HTML, and we're gonna select that as the font, and we want to import it into our style. So let's do it this way, and this is going to work a lot better when we bring it into our style sheet. You can also just link to the style sheet, but we are going to be linking out to the style sheet as well. So those are the two ways. So this is actually bringing into a CSS file, and that's going to work a little bit nicer and provide a better experience for us, because all of it's going to be contained within that one file. So even if we have multi-page site, then we can make use of it across different pages as well. So there we go. So this is essentially our website. Of course, let's clean this up a bit. And we see we've got the section 1 and section 5, and we've got all of our stuff down at the bottom. So one of the things too that we still need to add in is the active class. So the active class is going to help us distinguish actually which navigation slide we're on. So we don't have that happening yet. So let's add that in. So let's make this smaller. Open up our editor again. And let's specify an active class. So there's a number of ways to add the active class. And let's do that within the hyperlink. So we'll do hyperlink and active. So this is where we can specify. So sometimes what you might want to do is you might want to just add in that text decoration underline. And what actually works even better is if you do the border. So we'll do border bottom. So we'll add in a small border at the bottom. 3 pixels solid. And because we're using white, we'll just do it as white. So that way we see that it gets underlined. So the idea here is that as we move through them, they're going to get underlined. We can also update the color of it as well. So for now, let's set it as yellow. And actually, we should do this one to match as well. So we underline it as yellow. We set the color to yellow. And we can also even update something around the background if we wanted to as well. So that's, again, optional, however you want to look. So essentially, this is our active navigation item. And we want to bring in JavaScript so that as we scroll down, it actually changes the active element. So we're going to do that in the upcoming lesson. So let's wrap up the project with some JavaScript coming up. In the last lesson, we applied an active class to our navigation menu, and one of the things that we noticed is as we scroll down, it doesn't give the user any indication on which section they're at. So let's fix that, and we're going to do that with JavaScript. So first of all, let's grab our elements. So we're going to use document, and let's use query selector all. So what query selector all will do is it'll allow us to match all of the elements that are matching our selection, and we're going to grab the elements with the class of section. And we can console log those out so that we can see what elements have been grabbed. So refresh and open up the Chrome developer console. And we see that we grabbed all 6 sections, so those are the ones that we want. So now it's just a matter of looping through them and picking up where they are offset off the top. So we need to set up an object. So this object, so we'll call it sections, and this is where we can contain all the section information. So let's loop through all of those elements. So now that we've got the section array, we can do section and for each, and this will give us the ability to loop through all the elements. So grab element. And for now, let's just console log out element so we can see what we're getting within our for each loop. So back out to the page, refresh, and we can see that there we go. So we've grabbed all of the elements. So the next thing that we need is we want to grab the IDs. So if we do each one and we grab the ID, so this way we get section 1, 2, 3 all the way down. There's also another value that we want to make use of, and we want to get the elements, and this one is called offset top, and this will give us a numeric value. So let's refresh, and we can see where that particular element is located off the top. So we see section 1 is at 1 pixel, section 2 is at 530, section 3 is at 1058, and so on. So what we need to do is we need to drop this into our sections object. We're just going to grab the name of the element by ID, and we're going to equal it to the value, the numeric value, so where they're located. So that's going to build out an object called sections that we can loop through and we can take a closer look at as we scroll the web page. So the next is the Windows scroll. So on scroll allows us to fire off a function every time the user scrolls the page. So I'll show you what happens here. And this is actually going to write out scroll a whole lot of times. So let's refresh. And it's actually should be window. So let's refresh. So we've got scroll once, and notice that when I'm scrolling, this number is increasing. So there we go. So we're firing off whenever we're scrolling. And there's some variables that we need to make to be able to grab. So we're going to grab the scroll position. So we'll call it scroll position. And we'll get from the DOM, so document. And this one's called document element. And we want to get where that element is from the top. So that's the same value So this is where we're figuring out where we're getting the value from the top. And if that one doesn't work, then we want to do document, and we want to grab body scroll top. So what this will do is this will give us a position of where the scroll is. So let's try that out. So we see that as we refresh the page, we get a value of how many pixels we are off the top. And this is going to be useful within our formula because now it's just a matter of figuring out where our scroll position, so we've got the position of where the user is scrolling, and we need to just do a check to see where they fall in, on what section they fall in. And once we have that, then we can update the active class. So let's loop through all of the sections. So variable x in sections. So we're going to loop through all of the sections. And let's check. So we've got, we'll output variable x there. So we see that we've got section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So perfect, that's exactly what we need. So now we can grab the object sections. And we know that we've got all of those values in there. And all of those objects are going to just take that offset value that we have over here that we set originally when we looped through. So what we need to do is we need to do a condition. So we're going to check to see if that value is less than or equal to the scroll position. So that's that new value that we just picked up. And if it is, then we know that we've found the element that should have the active class. So first we need to remove the active class from the existing element. So we use query selector, and we're going to select whatever element has active, and we're going to set an attribute to it, and we're going to basically set a class of nothing. So we'll clear that one out. So it's not going to have any class in there. So that's removing the class. And next, we need to add a class. So we need to determine how we can make a selection of that element that we need to specify. And we already have that information because we can grab by the anchor text, which has an href that is equal to, and this is where we just need to specify the value that we're looking for. And the value is actually going to be contained within x. So x is actually going to be already holding that value. So grab that element and let's set an attribute. And this time, instead of removing the class, we're adding the active class. So I think we're ready to try that out. So let's try that out. And we can see as we're scrolling, we're getting that underline moving along. So that's how you can set the active class and have that effect where as you're scrolling on the single page website, the JavaScript is actually updating the active class. So it actually doesn't matter what you name the class. Typically it is called active, and it's going to automatically set whatever one is active. So as you scroll, it will automatically make that adjustment and that change. So go ahead and add this to your project. And next, we're going to do some final tweaks to our web page. And we're going to add in some other images. So we're actually going to add in some images in the background there. So that's coming up. Let's do some final tweaks to our project. So we know that we've finished off a lot of the styling. So we can take that styling and separate it out of our web page. So that will give us the ability to reuse it anywhere we want. So instead of style, let's update that, and we're going to link out. So link and linking out to style sheet. And then we just need to specify where it's located. So that's href. And we're going to keep it on the same directory. So there we go. So save. Let's create a new file. Let's dump that CSS in there. And then we'll just call it style.css. Get rid of the style tags. And this is style.css. So let's refresh our page. So there we go. So we still have everything intact. The other one that I wanted to do as well, so just do the sidebar, get back to the index page. I want to fix up the JavaScript as well. So usually I do like to keep things separated. So it's just because we're building it out so I don't have to flip back and forth. So this one, in order to link out to the script, it's going to be script, and this is where we need to specify a source. So we're just going to call it script.js. So it's a simple JS file. Save that. Let's create a new one. Drop our JavaScript in there. And we'll save it as script.js. And save. So there we go. So let's just test, make sure everything is still working. So everything's still good. So there's some other tweaks that we can do as well to our project. Let's also update our image within our styling. So we've got an image in there, and we might want to just float that. And what the float will do is this will give us the ability to inline it with the surrounding text. So just like that, so it's sitting in line with our text. We'll hide that and beautify it again. We also might want to do some padding around it. So it depends on what you're trying to do with your image. You might want to also be very specific which one, how you're applying that and what you're doing, because this is actually going to apply to all of the images. Sometimes you might want to have a thumbnail effect. So you might want to do a border. Have a white border around it. So you have that type of effect. Also, separate it out a little bit more from the text. Again, you can add a margin. So you can really keep going with that. So whatever your preference is, you can style it however it makes sense for you. The other thing too is let's actually add in some background images. So there's a great site over here that allows us to add background images. So let's do, and these are going to be background images. So maybe we want to do something tech. And we can see what that looks like. So it's going to be a computer site type thing. So instead of having our placeholder images, this is another option. And this is actually probably going to look a little bit better. It's going to look actually more like a real website. And let's also do another big one. There's a lot of these really pretty cool websites that are out there. So I get this is one for people. And maybe we want to do another tech one as well down here. So let's see what that looks like. So let's refresh. Oh, I forgot the quote there at the end. So we've got our sections there. So section 3, 4, 5, 6, and all the way down. So now we've got a completed website, and of course there's even more things you can do to tweak it to make it look even better. But for now, this is going to give you a really good start to create a website and adjust, tweak it, make it look however you want to present that content. Again, you could work with your own default content as well. So that's always better if you've got your own images and if you've got your text. If you have an idea of how much text you're placing in, it's always going to be very helpful. So go ahead and